Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Scrubbed Show. I hope you've all been keeping well. This week we have with us another incredible guest. We have with us Tom, who is the founder and CEO of DrDoctor, which you may have seen in the news recently after an incredible fundraise. They're a patient engagement platform helping to increase the capacity in the NHS, have supported millions of patients across the country. So it's a massive pleasure having you on the show, Tom. How are you?
Hi guys, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So before we go into your journey, I had a little flick through your LinkedIn and something caught my eye, and I want to start with that. And it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. What on earth is a yacht navigator? Like, what is that? How does someone that does that end up working and building a health tech company?
It's a bit different, isn't it? So yeah, my journey into health was unusual. It's fair to say. I when I was growing up, I got really into sailing, and I wanted to design boats for a living. That's what I wanted to do. I
Oh,
wanted
wow.
to be a guy that designed racing sailboats. And when I went to uni in Southampton, I went there because it's got a great naval architecture degree, and I did lots and lots of sailing. And I was lucky enough to travel around the world with some raceboat teams. And I got into the navigation role. And the navigation role is basically you stand at the back with all the data on the computer and the maps and the charts, and try and work out which way you're going to go around this racetrack. So, which way around the island am I going to go? What's the wind going to do next? And you try and feed all that information into the team who are driving the boat. Um, and it's a pretty cool job actually if you want to then go on and become a CEO, because you've got to take all the inputs, you've got to try and
Yeah.
synthesize them, and then you've got to give them back to the team to go and
Mhm.
actually do the hard work, which is making the boat very fast. Um, I loved it. I still do it occasionally, but I spent 10 years like kind of semi-pro racing around the world doing that. It was good
Oh,
fun.
wow. So it seems that you discovered your passion quite early on in your career. How on earth do you kind of leave the waters, get back onto the shore to kind of build this incredible company? Tell us a bit more about what you did after that and how the origin of DrDoctor.
Yeah, so it's three of us that started the business, and we met. It's myself, Rinesh, and Perrin. We still all work in the company. We're still very motivated by it, and we met consulting. So after uni, I went and worked. I did a couple of different jobs. I ended up working for a management consultancy firm called Newton, and Rinesh and I met literally in an onion peeling factory in Bedfordshire, and we went into this project, and it's the largest vegetable peeling factory in the country. So if you've had a Domino's pizza, you'll have had
Yeah.
some onions that Rinesh and I were involved in peeling. And it was a really cool project. You know, we helped that business save a lot of money. It went from not being very profitable to being quite profitable, and sort of were quite involved in the turnaround. And him and I ended up both going and working in the health care part of Newton. And I actually didn't want to work in health really. I was a engineer. I loved peeling onions. Um, and health kind of felt a bit messy, and I don't know, it didn't really appeal to me. But I got sent to do a project in Wolverhampton, and I just loved it.
Hmm.
I just loved how health, you have got the process side, you've got the people side. It's like, it's so unique from that point of view, and ended up specializing in health, as did René. It's where I met my other founder, Perrin, who's more on the IT side. And we ended up spending like a number of years working in hospitals up and down the country, doing outpatient work and theatres work. And Perrin won an HSJ award for the work he did in North West London, where he wrote the
Hmm.
theatre shaping system. And having done that for a few years, it was like 2012, and everybody had suddenly got iPhones. It had become it's amazing how quickly it happened. We all went from having
Yeah.
Nokia to having Blackberries, Nokia's to Blackberries to iPhones in the course of not very long at all. And I remember I got my first iPhone, and I was like, "This is awesome." So we thought, let's take everything we've learned about hospitals and let's build an app to allow people to schedule their outpatient appointments, because mobile phones have changed everything else. Like, they're going to change healthcare, surely. And here we are 10 years later, kind of still trying to solve that problem.
Tom, can we dive in just for a moment into sort of the consultancy work that you've done, right? A lot of our listeners will be thinking, what does a management consultant do in healthcare? Because as a clinician, right, we don't see them. We don't see them like F1s and F2s. We don't see them on the wards. But we hear they're all in the hospital. They're all working somewhere. What's the task like, and where are you guys? What are you guys doing?
They suddenly rock up wearing suits, and then everyone's starting to do hand wash all of a sudden for the first time that whole morning after seeing like 20 patients.
That's basically it, isn't it? Great question. It's a great question. I wonder myself. I mean, I think management consultancy gets a bit of a bad rep in a lot of places, because there's a lot of come in, write a report. That report basically says what everybody's already known. The report gets left in someone's drawer and nothing ever happens, right? Like, that is sadly how it used to be. We were quite lucky at Newton that like we used to do two things. We used to do pieces of work where we like guaranteed the fee that we charged against actually like making some change happen, which was quite cool. So we'd say, work at your outpatient department and we think we can help save £10 million, say, and we'll only charge a percentage of that. So that was quite cool. But we also focused not on the strategy, but on the how do you actually make things better. So an example of something I would have done is, I did a lot of this. I'd go and sit in outpatients or come into theatre. So I would scrub in and sit there all day and just sort of like watch what was happening and like look for the problems. So like, did we not have the right tools, or were we missing a key member of staff, or what else caused delays in theatres, and then put that data together and then work with the consultant and say, cool, like it looks like you were waiting for stuff here, that must have been frustrating, and then work out what was the downstream reason for that. So had we not procured enough of a certain tool, or was the rotor wrong, or whatever it was, and then like keep asking why and keep going up the chain until we can find the root cause, and then solve that root cause, try and make things run more efficiently. And that was really rewarding. You weren't just pointing out the problems, you were actually helping solve those issues. And I'm sure you found, right, like when you're working, it's in an organization like a hospital, you can point out a problem, but it never gets fixed.
Yeah.
No.
Right? Why hospitals are full of stuff to held together with gaffer tape and fixes that people have done themselves. And to be able to go and like keep asking why and keep going up the chain until we'd found the root cause and then solve it was really rewarding, because actually like the clinical teams are really pleased because we'd solve issues for them. We knew we were improving patients' lives. It was good. It's still hard, right? Like getting change to happen in hospitals is, I think, one of the hardest jobs going. Anyone who do a clinical change project knows how hard it is. Interestingly, that bled into the DNA of DrDoctor. And so much of what makes our business what it is today is we're not afraid to take on hard problems. And we're not afraid to actually go and do the change piece. And I think that's something which lots of tech businesses get wrong, is they think, you know what, as long as I've got the best technology, I'm sure people are just going to use this, right? And it doesn't work like that.
Amazing.
You've got to bring the organization on a journey. Yeah, exactly.
So Tom, if you can dive into the early moments of DrDoctor, the 0 to 1 phase, the when you were mapping out the problems, the issues, when you were going up that Y chain, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so we, as I said, we thought we were going to build an app for patients to book appointments. And actually, I'm really glad that two things happened. First one was we applied to an accelerator called Bethnal Green Ventures. And Bethnal Green Ventures, they still exist today. Anybody who's thinking about starting a business in health, I recommend you look at them, because they're a social impact accelerator. So they take for-profit businesses with purpose and they help accelerate them. And BGV helped us sort of interrogate the question we were trying to answer. And so instead of just writing an app, which we could have just gone and done, we actually spent 3 months in clinic with patients in what was Heather and Wexham, which is now part of Frimley, just asking them like what their pain points were. And loads and loads and loads of the feedback we got from people was, I don't really know why I'm here, and it's really hard to change this appointment. So we shifted our focus from booking new appointments to sending reminder messages which explain the context, and then making it easy to change appointments people already had. And that turned out to be a much more constrained and solvable problem. And we actually ended up writing the first version of our software purely using text messages. It just sent text messages that explained the context, and people could reply to them. It had like a little conversational engine in the background that, if you reply change, it would give you some new options, or you could text cancel, or you could text help. And we send 11 million text messages a month now.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So we still send a lot of text messages. But we didn't end up building what we thought we were going to build at the start.
No.
So that was one. I would say the other big thing is like when you're at that early stage of growth, so much of it is about like being able to iterate quickly on an experiment, because the hypotheses that you go in with are often wrong, to be honest. And it's when you start talking to users, whether they're clinical users or patient users, that you realize actually you need to build something slightly different. And so we were quite good at building like the lightest touch version of stuff. And we actually did things like Steve, who was one of our first employees who still works for us as a developer, he actually we were like, actually, should we write the code for this, or should we just do it manually? And he just sat there and waited to see if anyone texted back, and we just like replied manually to start with, just to see if patients like would use it. And it turned out that they really did, and we got lots of messages that were like, cool, all right, let's write some code to automate this quick. But that's some stuff I really recommend. I don't know if you've heard the story of the Airbnb founders who, like when they first started, they weren't getting much traction on the platform. So they said, we'll go and take the photographs, the accommodation for you. So like Brian Chensky went and took photos of this accommodation, and that's how they like got over that initial activation energy. And so I'm a massive fan of, to your question, like doing stuff that doesn't scale that well at the start, in order that you prove out like your ideas before you invest a lot of time and effort into writing expensive apps and websites.
No, definitely. And I'm a big fan of that approach as well. One of the questions I had, and I've seen a lot more on LinkedIn recently, was this. I don't know if it's frustration, but there seems to be a lot of dismay at clinicians feeling that non-clinical individuals are coming and founding these companies that have no clinical background whatsoever. I want to know if you kind of faced that resistance when you did it kind of 10 years ago. And do you think maybe the beauty of the success of DrDoctor was the fact that you were someone with a non-clinical background that could come in and straight away see kind of some of the stark problems that exist that maybe as clinicians we don't see because we're in it on a day-to-day basis?
I think being non-clinical was an advantage for us at the beginning because of exactly what you said. I think it helps that like we're all really engineers, and engineers and clinicians are really similar, although people don't normally say it. It's about like solving problems in a logical way. It's about having good recall. It's about being able to solve the people stuff as well. And as an engineer, I could come in and I could talk to clinicians in a way that we spoke the same language, like use evidence, like prove your hypotheses, like all the stuff, right? But it allowed me to have a different enough view on the problem that I could sort of come in tangentially. Interestingly, we're now looking to recruit lots of clinical people into our business. So if there's anyone listening, reach out.
Yeah.
Because now what we do is we are increasingly solving like properly clinical challenges on our platform. And now I'm like, cool, this is outside of my wheelhouse. I need people that have been on the front line working as a clinician to come and solve that for us. But in those early days, viewing it as a process engineer, I think was a benefit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that seems to be the general consensus. One of the follow-up questions, and I know we have a lot of health tech founders and builders who listen to this, is you've kind of identified a problem, you've kind of patched together some sort of solution that seems to be working. how do you then go about in getting or commercializing the platform or the product? How do you get it into trust and NHS? I know you work with a lot of them now, but who was the first, trust or hospital you worked with?
So we work with 50, more than 50 trusts now, which is a decent chunk of the market. Our first 3 customers were Heather and Wexham, which is now Frimley.
Okay.
And we got Heather and Wexham through joint applying for some funding. It was, at the time, it was called the ITK Fund, which is the Interoperability Toolkit. And we got 60 grand from NHS Digital to basically like integrate our platform with IPM, which is their EHR. So that got us off the ground. So I would say to people, for your first site, find an engaged customer, go and find a problem that they have, and then see if you can find some third-party funding. So we knew Heather Allen and Nigel Ewins, who are the IT department, because we'd worked with them at Newton. They had a specific problem around DNA rates, and we went and solved that for them. And we got some external funding, and it was really successful. So, find someone who's engaged, make sure the problem you're solving is specific, and then look for third-party money, because there's lots of it around. We then signed, we did lots of smaller bits of work, and then the next couple of like really big contracts we signed were Nottingham University Hospitals, who are still a customer of ours today. And there was a combination of like forward-thinking IT department, a brilliant leader there. So Andrew Fernie's a great IT leader, and Lisa Lawrence, who worked for us still in digital, and Lisa just drove that project for us. And we focused on delivering a return on investment. So can we save the trust money through reduction in admin, reduction in DNA, and better clinic fill rates? And we saved the trust a lot of cash, and so that became really successful. And then the third one was Guy's and St Thomas.
Yeah.
And what happened at Guy's and St Thomas was that we did a pilot in one department, and again it was looking at did not attend rates. And in Guy's and St Thomas, it was women's services, and they were about 3. We started working about August, sorry, and they were behind their outpatient activity plan by a couple of hundred patients. And we put in place the product, and we managed to increase the throughput in clinic by about 10% total. So we're seeing 10% more patients than they would have been otherwise seeing. We took them from a couple hundred patients behind plan to 600 patients ahead of plan. And because they were, which is amazing, right? And because they were on a payment by results tariff, they could claim the income for all those patients. So we managed to claim 317, and I remember the numbers, right, because it was such an important piece of work for us. £317,000 of additional income claimed over 6 months. And off the back of that, we could then go to the organisation more broadly and say, look, we've saved £317,000 we've claimed £317,000 of additional income here. If we scale this up across the organisation, you're going to make a significant improvement in your financial position. And Ian Abbs, who was the medical director at the time, he's now the chief exec of Guy's and St Thomas, he saw that data that we'd built. And being a clinician, he looked at the evidence and he went, okay, this makes sense. And we got the buy-in of the IT department, a guy called Gary McAllister, who's gone on to do great things at NHS London, the finance department, the ops department, and they put together a business case to buy the product and roll it out across Guy's and St Thomas. And we rolled it out across Guy's and St Thomas in about 8 months, which was a really quick rollout. And we went on to save Guy's and St Thomas £4 million a year. And GSTT really were a big teaching trust in the country to put patient appointments online. It was really, really impressive. And from there, we've never looked back, really.
That's incredible. Shout out to GSTT. We trained there as well as medical students. One of the questions I had was, so I had a look on the website, Tom, on the DrDoctor website, and a number that struck me as obscene was kind of the amount of money spent on physical paper, sending out to people. I think the number was like 100 million. Like I still can't fathom that. I don't know if it's true or not, but like, tell me.
I mean, the NHS, if you think about it, for every appointment that happens in the NHS, we send an average of 3 letters, right? So you've got like an appointment letter, a reminder letter, then a post-appointment letter, and often there's many more as well. And each one of those costs 50p if you're really, really cheap, up to like £1.80 probably. And then we have, I don't even know how many millions of appointments we have in the NHS, right? We have like millions and millions and millions of them, and it's a huge cost. And it's also crazy because letters, not only are they really expensive, they're really slow.
Yep.
So you try and get a patient in for a 2-week wait clinic, right? So, suspected cancer. Target is you see them within 2 weeks of referral. You send a letter. The letter takes 3 days. You've already lost 3 days out of your like 2-week pathway. They often go to the wrong place. The addresses are often wrong, and also the evidence shows that most people find hospital letters hard to understand. I don't know if you've recently seen one, but the information hierarchy is often quite poor. The important bits are lost. They're quite scary. If English isn't your first language, they're often like written in a very complicated way. They don't work if you're transient. There are lots of patients that like Hep C patients, classic example, right? Like move around a lot. Like they're not going to get the letters. There's so many reasons they don't work for patients. Yet somehow we're still addicted to this like expensive, slow, hard to use way of communicating. And so much of what we do is about, let's make it digital. I talk about like 3 slices. So I say channel shift patients away from the phone and away from post onto online. If you can do that, you can save millions and millions of pounds. Like without even, you make the service better and you save money. Like that is a total no-brainer. We should be doing that everywhere. Once you've channel shifted patients, you can then do slightly more advanced functionality. So patient self-scheduling, like waitlist management, kind of patient-initiated follow-up models, all that stuff. And then once you've done that, you can begin to do remote monitoring and using data to like change clinical practice. But it starts with channel shift. And organizations that don't get the channel shift bit right, they struggle with the rest of it.
And how have the more older population of patients sort of been receptive to your concept? Because they're the population that aren't so digitally savvy. Well, we say they aren't. What's your sort of verdict on that?
Yeah.
What's your data show?
That is a good question. So first of all, I think it's a disservice to most people, to old people, to say that they don't use digital, particularly since COVID. The number of grandmas out there that learn to use FaceTime so they can talk to their grandchildren is pretty high. I know that's true. Yeah, exactly. I know
it's a tablet now, but she knows. She's a whiz at it.
Exactly. And I actually met the other day a group of ladies that they've been doing like Skype coffee mornings. And I said, is that since COVID? And they went, no, we did Skype coffee mornings before COVID. It's easier than like, we're all trying to get out of our houses. So I think it's like, we don't give people enough credit for that. However, there are groups of people that aren't digitally literate, and there are groups of people who actually have been much more comfortable with a letter and being able to speak to someone on the phone. And one of the really cool things about the shift to digital is, if you imagine you work in the booking center in a big hospital, Guy's and St Thomas, right? You have something like 2 million outpatient appointments a year to book, and there's probably 40 people that work in that booking center. So each day you're taking hundreds of phone calls. Now, when we shift patients to using online, what happens is the phone call volume drops, because all of us lot start doing it on our phone. We're not going to ring up, are we? So phone call volume drops, and that means that like when somebody who does need to speak to them, either because they're elderly or because they have additional needs, or just because they're a bit nervous and they want reassurance, they can get through. They don't sit on the phone waiting for 40 minutes. They get straight through. And then when they do get through, that person can spend longer with them. They can spend longer talking to them. They can help book transport. They can, reassure them that it's all going to be okay. Do the human side of healthcare. And so that's the real joy of like the channel shift. Like by automating and making it online for sort of 80% of people, the 20% that still want to phone up, they can just have a much, much better experience.
No, definitely. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think I'm the type of people, if I need to call and do something, I find it beyond frustrating. Yeah. And I like the whole kind of patient engagement, kind of the back and forth, rescheduling things. It's a lot easier. One of the questions I had, and I've been thinking about, was there's a lot of innovation happening in the space. Obviously, one of the problems in NHS is the fact that a lot of information is siloed. Do you think as companies grow and they get a bit more of the market share, that it then becomes a bit more siloed, but except its companies evolve? So let's say you've got 50 trusts you're working with and a different company doing something similar to you, DrDoctor, has another 50 trusts. How then do you kind of integrate, what kind of issues can arise from those situations?
Yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? So we've been banging the drum for kind of data sharing and interoperability for a long time because I think it's better for patients, right? So we've done a couple of things. So like our platform works best when it's integrated with the electronic health records, so the Cerner or the Epic or the System C or the whatever. And so we can get the data from those systems and bring it into ours. That's got a lot better in the last few years. But we've also tried to build partnerships with other companies. Okay. So we've got a really strong partnership with Patients Know Best. And Patients Know Best are like the country's leading personal health record. And some of our functionality overlaps and some stuff we do which is different. And we decided that actually we should try and share data across those two. So we built an integration between the two products, and you can sign on to one. You sign into DrDoctor and you can view your PKB record, or you can sign into PKB and you can do your DrDoctor transactions. And that's now live in North West London. So if you're a patient in North West London in Chelsea, shortly Imperial, and the rest of that ICS, you'll be able to sign into one of our products and share data, which is really cool. We also signed some partnerships with some primary care companies. So we're about to do a piece of work in Birmingham with one of the big primary care online consultation providers, where we're thinking about, we do the hospital side really well, they do the GP side really well. Maybe we should try and bring that together. And as a patient who starts their journey in GP land, they should be able to travel all the way through their referral, through their outpatient appointment and beyond, and the data should be shared. So I think, like, to answer your question, like as suppliers, we have a bit of a duty to make our products work together and improve the patient experience. So one really good thing is the NHS app. So the NHS app has, everybody downloaded it to get their COVID pass, right? So it had this huge uptick in usage, and lots of us in the background have integrated our product with the NHS app. So you can now view your secondary care appointments in some of our sites through the NHS app directly. And I think that's really cool because it acts as a jumping off point for lots of journeys. And it also kind of aggregates the data together for patients. And I think that's a really amazing bit of work by NHS England, basically.
No, and I agree. And it's reassuring to hear that the openness to data sharing and interoperability as well.
It's critical, right, to make this stuff work. Like no one business is going to solve this problem on their own. It needs a consortium of us all to work together and try really hard to do that.
Amazing. Tom, when it comes to forming these collaboration partnerships, you talked about conducting pilot studies, right? It requires that first initial step. A lot of people are going to be thinking they've got an idea, they want to get it in there, they want to test it. Practically speaking, have you got some tips to get your foot in the door to form that collaboration, talk to the change maker, the person who makes the decision? You got any tips for us?
Yeah, I do. So first of all, get out there and network. And that's, for a while that was hard because everybody was remote. people are going back to networking now. And at the beginning of our journey, I went to as many networking events as I could just to like meet people. And it's by doing that you meet people that have a problem that you can solve and other innovators. So do that first of all. Linked to that, I think, is as soon as you're given the opportunity, go and visit those people where they work. So I think innovators sometimes aren't quick enough to try and get really close to the problem. So I would always get on the train and go and visit a hospital who had an interest in our products, and I would like go and get into a clinic, and see what was really happening, because it's there that you have the really great conversations and you can move stuff forward and you can build champions. On that point about building champions, so to make things happen in a hospital, you need champions at lots of levels. So, the ideal pilot, you've got an engaged clinician who's got a problem that needs to be solved, or an administrator or a manager, who can like push it forward on a sort of practical basis, and then some air cover from somebody senior in the organization who can sign off whatever needs to be signed off. And if you have just one, either end, just the executive person or just the champion, things tend to get stuck. If it's just the executive, you can get sign off for stuff, but nothing will happen on the ground. If it's just someone on the ground, you can make progress, but you're never going to get budgetary sign off. You're never going to get IG sign off. So I call it like the pincer movement. Make sure you've got a champion on the ground and a champion high up that can give you air cover. So that's really important. And then I think the last bit is be really specific about the problem you're solving and what the benefits are. I think quite often people will see a problem, they'll try and solve it, but they won't be totally clear on what's the return on investment here? What's the improvement in outcomes here? What's the change in patient experience here? And if you don't know what those things are, you can't measure whether or not the innovation has made an impact. And if you can't measure whether or not the innovation has an impact, there's no point doing a pilot, because what are you trying to prove?
No, definitely. I think that was really good advice, actually, having the stakeholders at multiple levels. And I can see a lot of companies struggling as to why they can get something off the ground and the measuring of impact. I want to take a step back and talk about you as an individual, Tom. You've been kind of running the company for about 10 years now. How have you evolved as an individual? And tell us a bit more about leadership, what it takes to lead a company like DrDoctor with millions of users, with millions of investor money in the bank. You have a lot of pressure, I imagine, from various stakeholders yourself.
Yeah, there certainly is. The coolest thing about being a founder is you go on a personal journey like no other. And I am a very different person to the person I was 10 years ago when we started this business. Very different. You have to have tenacity. You have to really believe in what you're doing. I don't recommend it as a career for people who aren't really passionate about the problem they're solving. It's just, but if you are passionate about the problem you're solving, it is the best thing you can ever do with your life, because it's so rewarding. I get on the train to come to the office, and every single day I look forward to, and I feel very, very, privileged to have that. You have to do different things. So the person who is successful at getting that first pilot is a hustler. You've got to go and, hunt down that problem and, persuade people to take a risk on you and do stuff they wouldn't, otherwise have done. And that is very different to the person who now, in my case, we've got 150 staff, we'll be 200 people by the end of the year. They need something else from me as a chief exec. They need consistency, and they need clarity, and they need execution focus rather than innovation focus. And so kind of as you go through that journey as an entrepreneur, the most important skill is self-awareness and recognizing like what the organization needs from you as you go through those different parts of the journey. And that's something which I've been really lucky that I've worked with a coach now for 4 years, and she's amazing. We meet every 6 weeks. She spends 2 hours with me, and she holds me to account on like, have I worked on my own personal development? And sometimes that's about developing my growing edges and for me, some of that was learning to be more directive when that was appropriate. And as I said, moving from innovating to executing. But also forces me to be kind to myself when the journey's hard. And it's, you can be your own worst critic. We're all ambitious, right? Like we all have very high expectations of ourselves and we want to achieve great things. And sometimes when the journey hasn't been a straight line, it can be really hard. Like the lows of being an entrepreneur are very, very low. The highs are very high, but the lows are very low. And actually having someone who, reminded me that we were doing a great job and, to take the time out and to work on self-care. And for me, that's making sure that I go outside, go for a run, walk the dog, has been an incredibly important part of building resilience. I think that's my second big learning point is to go on a journey like this. Resilience is absolutely key. You have to be able to take the knocks, and you have to always find the optimism to look for the next kind of uplift in opportunity, even when sometimes it can be really hard to find. And yeah, over the last 10 years, my sort of personal resilience, I think, has massively gone up. And you find yourself, it's interesting, right? I think entrepreneurs tend to be quite spiky characters, generally speaking, really good at some stuff and really bad at some other stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of careers rub the spikiness off people because they look to average out, actually we don't want you to be an amazing, inspiring speaker, just give a decent written, but be better at this bit here that you're not so good at. But I think people should lean into their spikiness. And people should lean into the stuff that they're really great at. And I've been very fortunate in the last few years that I've been able to focus on the stuff I'm good at and hire some people who are great at the stuff I'm not great at. And that's much better than trying to be sort of average across the board at everything. Lean into the stuff that you enjoy and you're good at, and find others that can do the other bits.
Definitely. Touching on that point, give us an example of something you recently leaned into that you discovered is your superpower, your unfair advantage compared to other founders or chief execs.
That's a really good question. So I am the world's most irritating optimist. In that I always think the best in people, and I always think that there's so much opportunity to be found everywhere. And my team, I think, probably find that annoying sometimes, but it means that we're always looking for the next opportunity. And links to that is leaning into as the business gets bigger, leading the team, but actually not just managing the team, really leading the team. And the thing I'm proudest of in DrDoctor is Christmas party this year, standing up in front of 150 people, half of whom were new because we'd recruited so many people in the last 12 months, and feeling like they all believed in the mission. And I think for me, that's the essence of being a good leader is everybody in your organization know where you're going and why you're going there and really believe in that why. I think I've lent hard into that. I've always believed in my why, why I want to be here. I want to make the NHS sustainable and I want to make it access available to everybody when they need it. And I've lent into communicating that to my team and making sure that they want to be here as much as I want to be here. And it means that they can then be great at their jobs. And I'm really, really, really proud of all of that. And I look forward to leaning into it even harder as we go from 150 to 300 to 1,000,
It sounds incredible. And I think it's one of those things you do need to be successful. But you mentioned something, you kind of see the best in people, and there's a saying, not everything that shines is gold, right? How does that relay into kind of recruiting the right talent? If you're someone, you're sitting behind the table and some of these, they're charming, they know all the right things to say and you believe in them. How do you you've over 100 people, how do you find the right talent and how do you keep them is another question.
Yeah, I mean, recruiting is the most important skill after you've got product market fit. So after you've solved your problem, the most important thing is recruiting great people. And I wouldn't say we're perfect at it. What we do well though is it's a combination of being really clear on like the type of person you want in terms of like attitude and skills, and linking that back all the way back to your company values, and then building great process around it. And we're lucky that we've got a fantastic people team at DrDoctor. They're really motivated. And so they run our recruitment processes really well. Like running a great process means you get great candidates. If you go on Glassdoor, you can see that our internal people reviews are all really high. And we try and run a really, combination of like a really clear data-driven recruitment process. We try and do it effectively for candidates so that everyone gets a good experience. We've done well, like hiring senior people is hard. We've done really well hiring senior people from that network we built. I talked earlier about solving problems, when you're at the beginning of your journey, networking. That network has done pretty well over the years, and lots of the best people we've hired have come from our health tech networks or our broader, network. I think that's important. And then like also referrals. Like if you have good people, getting them to like referring people that they know is a great way of hiring. You spend a lot of money on recruiters easily in business. And I think time and effort spent building a really strong internal people function, and then lots of referrals from existing staff is the best way to build scalable teams. And then your point about retention. So there's no point recruiting great people if they all leave. And I think the number one thing there is culture. Building a great culture where fantastic A players can go and be A players. And that means building strong guidelines for people, but giving them autonomy within that. Building really strong psychological safety, space for people to fail, people to ask questions, people to get things wrong and feel like that they can do that. That's absolutely critical. And we work really hard at that, DrDoctor. We don't always get it perfect. I'm not going to claim that, but we try ever so hard to create that for our members of staff. Flexibility around working. We live in a post-COVID world now. It's really important. We've got a couple of developers who joined us when we were 5 people who are still with us, 150.
Oh, wow.
And I believe that they're here because they believe in the mission. But also, so the big things like they believe in the mission, but also we're flexible enough that they can pick their kids up from school. People like adults and people treat you like well back in return. I've always believed in that. So I think that does as well. Like you don't have to be in the office. You don't have to work certain hours. We trust people to work hard. And guess what? When you trust people, they give back. So all of those things really help. And then I think making sure you give people opportunities for promotion and self-development within an organization is really important. Like making sure that they have the opportunity to grow with the business. And then sharing the upside is the last point. So everybody who joins DrDoctor gets shares. Not every business does that, but everyone who joins us gets share options. Doesn't matter what level you're at. And then there's the opportunity to have more if you want. Because I believe that we're all working towards a really exciting impact and financial outcome as an organization. And I want everybody to share in both, to share in the impact we're going to have on the NHS, but also any potential financial upside.
No, I think that's incredible. Just hearing you speak over the last few minutes, I can tell kind of the maturity in the business from where it may have been 10 years ago when you were starting with your co-founders off the back of this onion factory.
Yeah.
But it's been a massive pleasure to kind of meet you, Tom, hear the incredible work you're doing. We love the stuff you're doing. We wish you all the best. Congratulations again on the raise.
Thank you.
We want to see you kill it. Absolutely. Yeah. And the next time I have an outpatient appointment, I want to see it's from DrDoctor.
We're there for you.
Yeah. But all right. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I really enjoyed it. It's a great podcast.
Nice. Thank you so much, buddy. Take care.